Mila Carter thought she'd escaped him, moved cities, changed jobs, rebuilt herself one pastry at a time. But when she stepped into that hotel lobby with a box of eclairs balanced on her hip, she saw him, Evan Blake, her ex-fiancé, the man who'd turned love into a cage. He moved toward her with that smile, the one that used to promise forever but delivered control. She ran, straight into an elevator, straight into a stranger whose dark eyes held more danger than she'd ever known. And in that moment, between one breath and the next, everything changed. If you're drawn to stories of second chances and dangerous protection, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The February rain came down in sheets, turning Manhattan streets into rivers of neon and exhaust. Mila Carter balanced the pastry box against her chest as she ducked under the awning of the Meridian Hotel, her baker's whites already damp at the shoulders. She'd made this delivery run a dozen times. Drop off the special order at the concierge desk, collect the signature, disappear back into the kitchen where she belonged. Simple, safe, invisible. She preferred invisible these days. The lobby stretched before her like a cathedral of marble and gold, all soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers that caught the gray afternoon light and transformed it into something precious. Business executives moved through the space with purpose, their expensive shoes clicking against Italian tile. A couple laughed near the fountain, champagne flutes raised in celebration. Mila kept her head down, navigating the familiar path to the concierge station. She was 3 steps from safety when she saw him. Evan Blake stood near the elevator bank, his phone pressed to his ear, his profile sharp as a knife. Sandy hair perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than her month's rent. The same face she'd seen every morning for 3 years, until she'd finally found the courage to stop seeing it altogether. Mila's breath caught. Her fingers tightened on the pastry box until the cardboard began to buckle. No, not here, not now. She'd moved to Brooklyn, changed her number, worked exclusively in the back kitchen of Andre's patisserie, never taking front-of-house shifts where customers might see her. She'd been so careful, so deliberate in her disappearance. But Evan had always been good at finding things, at keeping tabs on what he considered his. She started to back away slowly, hoping to reach the service corridor before he turned. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. "Mila?" His voice cut through the lobby's ambient noise like a bell. Clear, certain, inescapable. She froze. "Mila Carter, I thought that was you." He was walking toward her now, phone lowered, that familiar smile spreading across his features. The smile that used to make her feel chosen, special, before she'd learned it was just another form of control. "Evan?" Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "I'm working. I can't." "You look good." He stopped just inside her personal space, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same brand he'd always worn. "Really good. Brooklyn's been treating you well?" Her stomach dropped. He knew where she lived. "I have to deliver this." She held up the pastry box like a shield. "They're expecting it." "I've been trying to reach you." His tone shifted, concern bleeding into something sharper. "You changed your number, blocked me on everything. That's pretty extreme, don't you think?" "We broke up, Evan, 6 months ago. We had a fight." He reached for her arm, fingers closing around her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, never hard enough to leave marks. But firm, possessive. "People fight, Mila. They don't just disappear." The touch sent ice through her veins. She tried to pull back, but his grip tightened fractionally. "You walked away without giving us a chance to fix things." His voice dropped lower, intimate and accusing all at once. "Without giving me a chance. Don't I deserve closure? Don't I deserve an explanation?" The elevator bank was 15 feet away. Mila could see the polished brass doors, the illuminated numbers counting floors. Freedom was so close. "I have to go." She twisted her wrist, trying to break free without making a scene. "Please let go." 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. We can grab coffee, talk like adults. I said let go." Something in her voice must have registered because his eyes narrowed. For just a second, she saw the real Evan, the one who'd screamed at her for being 10 minutes late, who'd gone through her phone while she slept, who'd slowly, methodically isolated her from everyone who might have helped her see the truth. Then the mask slid back into place. "Don't make this difficult," he said quietly. "I just want to talk." "Is that really so unreasonable?" "Yes," she wanted to scream. "Yes, it is. You lost the right to my time when you made me afraid in my own home, when you made me believe I was crazy for wanting something different, when you convinced me that leaving would be impossible." But the words stuck in her throat, heavy as stones. The pastry box slipped from her other hand, hitting the marble with a dull thud. Evan's eyes flicked to it, his grip loosening just enough. Mila ran. She heard him call her name, heard his footsteps behind her, but she didn't look back. The elevator bank blazed in her vision. One set of doors stood open, empty, waiting. She threw herself forward, her baker's clogs skidding on the polished floor. Evan's hand grazed her shoulder. She lunged through the elevator doors and crashed directly into a man standing inside. It was like hitting a wall, a warm, immovable wall that smelled of expensive leather and winter air. Mila stumbled backward, would have fallen if strong hands hadn't caught her elbows, steadying her with surprising gentleness. "Easy." The voice was deep, quiet, and absolutely calm. The kind of voice that didn't need to rise to command attention. Mila looked up. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair pushed back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes so dark they appeared black in the elevator's soft lighting. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like armor, the kind of tailoring that spoke of serious money and serious power. But it was his expression that caught her. No surprise at her sudden entrance, no irritation, just a focused, measuring intelligence that took in everything. Her uniform, her breathlessness, the fear she knew must be written across her face. "Mila!" Evan appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath, his composure cracking. "For God's sake, stop being dramatic." The stranger's hands were still on Mila's elbows. She felt them tighten fractionally as he looked past her toward Evan. "The elevator's full," he said. "Like hell it is." Evan stepped forward. "Mila, get out here. We need to—" The stranger moved. It wasn't aggressive, wasn't threatening. He simply shifted his weight, angling his body between Mila and the doors in a way that suddenly made the spacious elevator feel very occupied. His presence expanded, filling the space with something solid and immutable. "I said," he repeated, each word precise and final, "the elevator's full." Evan's face flushed. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'm a platinum member at this hotel. I'm staying in the executive suites. You can't just—" The stranger reached past Evan and pressed the button for the penthouse floor. Then he pressed closed doors. "Wait, Mila, you can't just—" The brass doors slid shut, severing Evan's protest mid-sentence. Silence crashed over them like a wave. Mila stared at the closed doors, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She'd run. She'd actually run, and Evan had chased her. And this stranger— She became suddenly, acutely aware that she was alone in an elevator with a man she didn't know. A man who'd just blocked someone from entering with the kind of quiet authority that suggested he was very used to being obeyed. The elevator began to rise. "Thank you," she managed, taking a careful step backward. "I'm sorry for crashing into you. I'll get off at the next— Are you hurt?" The question caught her off guard. His eyes were on her wrist, where Evan's fingers had been. She'd rubbed it unconsciously, the ghost of that grip still present on her skin. "No, I'm fine." He didn't— "I'm fine." The man's gaze lifted to her face, and Mila felt pinned by it, examined, not in the way Evan used to look at her, cataloging flaws and imperfections. This was different, clinical almost, like he was reading a language written in the set of her shoulders, the flutter of her pulse at her throat. "You're not fine," he said simply. The elevator shuddered. Mila grabbed for the rail as the car jerked to a stop. The lights flickered once, twice. The soft music that had been playing cut out abruptly. Then everything went still. "What?" Mila looked up at the floor indicator, stuck between 7 and 8. "Oh no, 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 no." She jabbed at the buttons. Nothing. Pressed the emergency call. A burst of static, then silence. The storm must have affected the power grid. The stranger pulled out his phone, frowning at the screen. No signal. Mila pressed herself against the far wall, trying to calculate how long they might be stuck. How long before someone noticed the elevator was stalled? How long before Evan started searching the building for her? How long she'd be trapped in a small metal box with a complete stranger? Hey, the man's voice had softened fractionally. Breathe. The emergency systems will kick in. Someone will get us out. You don't understand. He'll wait. Evan will wait for me in the lobby, and when they get us out, he'll be there, and I can't do this again. Do what again? The question was too gentle, too knowing. It cracked something open inside her chest. Explain myself, justify my choices, defend my right to walk away from something that was killing me piece by piece. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. He makes me feel crazy, like I'm overreacting, like I'm the problem, and part of me still believes him. Part of me still thinks maybe if I just explained it better, if I just made him understand. She cut herself off, horrified. She was babbling to a stranger in a stalled elevator after running away from her ex like a scared rabbit. Could this day get any worse? The man was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the opposite wall and slid down to sit on the floor, his back against the mirrored panel. Long legs stretched out before him, perfectly at ease. Sit, he said. If we're stuck, might as well be comfortable. Mila hesitated, but standing felt too exposed, too much like waiting for judgment. Slowly, she lowered herself to the floor opposite him, tucking her knees to her chest. I'm Mila, she offered. Obviously, since you heard, Dante. Thank you, Dante, for blocking him. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He said it with such certainty that Mila blinked. You don't even know me. I know enough. His eyes hadn't left her face. How long were you together? 3 years. How long since you left? 6 months. Has he contacted you before today? The questions were direct, almost businesslike, but there was something underneath them, a focus that made Mila feel like her answers actually mattered. He tried at first, calls, texts, emails. I blocked everything, changed my number. I thought he'd given up. Men like that don't give up, Dante said quietly. They just get better at hiding their obsession. The words sent a chill down her spine because they were true. Because she'd been telling herself for months that Evan would move on, find someone else, forget about her. But deep down, she'd known. She'd always known. You sound like you have experience. I've seen patterns. I recognize control when I see it. What do you do? Mila asked, then immediately backtracked. Sorry, that's none of my business. You're very calm for someone stuck in an elevator. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. I own the hotel. Mila's eyes widened. You, what? The Meridian. I own it, among other properties. She stared at him, taking in the suit with new understanding, the quiet authority, the way he'd dismissed Evan without a second thought. So when you said the elevator was full, I meant it. Despite everything, Mila felt a laugh bubble up, small and breathless, but real. You kicked out a platinum member. He was bothering you. He's going to complain. Let him. Dante's expression didn't change. I've dealt with worse. The elevator's emergency lights cast strange shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles and planes. He should have looked intimidating, dangerous even. But something about his stillness, his contained presence, made Mila feel safer than she had in months. What brought you to the hotel today? She asked, trying to ground herself in normal conversation. Besides saving pastry chefs from their exes. Meeting. Ran late. I was heading back to the office. He paused. What were you delivering? Eclair. Custom order for someone's anniversary dinner. She winced, remembering the box she'd dropped, which are probably crushed by now. I'll have them replaced. You don't have to eat. Consider it payment for the entertainment value of watching your ex's face when the doors closed. This time Mila did laugh, really laugh, and it felt like breaking surface after being underwater too long. They fell into silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Dante seemed perfectly content to wait, his patience as solid as the walls around them. Mila found herself studying him, the way he held himself, loose but ready, like a blade at rest. The steady rhythm of his breathing, the fact that he'd positioned himself across from her instead of beside her, giving her space even in this confined area. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Go ahead." "Why did you really help me? You could have just let him in. Let us figure it out ourselves." Dante was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, "I watched my mother spend 15 years with a man who smiled in public and crushed her spirit in private. She'd make excuses, apologize for his mood, convince herself she was the problem." His voice was even, factual, but something cold moved beneath it. "I was 12 when I finally understood what I was seeing, 17 when I got her out." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me to recognize the pattern, the grip on the wrist, the reasonable tone covering unreasonable demands, the way you looked at him, like you were preparing to defend yourself from someone you used to love." His eyes met hers. "So when you ask why I helped, it's because I've seen that look before. And I made a promise to myself a long time ago that if I ever had the power to do something about it, I would." Mila's throat tightened. She'd spent 6 months feeling ashamed of her fear, weak for running instead of confronting, crazy for not being able to just get over it. But this man, this stranger, saw her panic and called it what it was, recognized the danger she'd been trying to name. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing it." "Tell me about the bakery dream," Dante said, shifting the subject with surprising gentleness. "How did you mentioned explaining yourself, justifying choices. That's not about a relationship. That's about a future he didn't want you to have." Mila pulled her knees closer. "I wanted to open my own place, something small, a neighborhood bakery where people could come in and everything would smell like butter and vanilla and home. Evan said it was impractical, risky. He was a consultant, made good money, and he kept saying we needed to be smart about our future, that my hobby was sweet but not a career." "Your hobby." He never used my name for it, never called it a business or a dream, just a hobby, something cute I did with my hands. She laughed bitterly. "Eventually I started to believe him, started to think I was being childish for wanting it. But you didn't stop wanting it. No, I just stopped talking about it, which made him angrier. He'd find my sketches of the shop layout, my recipe notebooks, and he'd get this look, like I was betraying him by having something that was mine." "So you left." "I left." Mila took a shaky breath. "Packed 3 bags and disappeared in the middle of the day while he was at work. Moved to Brooklyn. Got a job at Andre's Patisserie working exclusively in the back kitchen. I've been saving, planning. In another year, maybe 2, I'll have enough to—" She stopped, realizing she was telling this stranger her entire life story. But Dante just nodded, absorbing it all with that same focused attention. "You'll do it sooner than that," he said. "What makes you so sure?" "Because you already left the hardest thing. The rest is just logistics." The simplicity of the statement struck something deep in her chest. For 6 months, she'd been measuring her progress in tiny increments. Every day without contact, every dollar saved, every moment of peace reclaimed. But she hadn't thought of it as building toward something, only as running from. "What about you?" she asked. "The hotel business? Is that what you always wanted?" Dante's expression shifted, something complicated moving across his features. "I wanted security, control over my environment, the ability to protect what was mine." He paused. "The hotel business provided that, among other things." "Other things?" "Real estate, investments, various interests." The vagueness should have been suspicious, but Mila was too tired to analyze it. She let her head rest against the elevator wall, exhaustion catching up with her adrenaline crash. "How long do you think we'll be stuck?" she asked. "Not long. The emergency crews are probably already—" The elevator lurched. Mila gasped as they dropped 6 inches, the sudden movement making her stomach flip. Then the car stabilized and the lights flickered back to full power. The soft music resumed mid-note. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the inconvenience." A voice crackled through the speaker. "Elevator service is being restored. Please remain calm." The car began to move, descending smoothly toward the lobby. Dante stood, offering his hand. Mila took it, letting him pull her to her feet. His palm was warm, his grip steady. For just a moment, she didn't want to let go. "What will you do?" he asked. "When the doors open?" "I'll go out through the service entrance, get back to the patisserie, hope Evan gives up and leaves." "And if he doesn't?" The question hung between them as the floor numbers counted down. 7, 6, 5. Mila didn't have an answer. She'd been running on instinct and hope, telling herself that distance would be enough, that Evan would lose interest, that she could rebuild her life one careful, invisible step at a time. But standing here, seeing herself through Dante's eyes, she realized how fragile that plan was, how much of it relied on luck and Evan's potential mercy. "I don't know," she admitted. 4, 3. Dante reached into his jacket and produced a business card. Simple, expensive cardstock with embossed lettering. Just a name, Dante Moretti, and a phone number. "If he contacts you again," Dante said, pressing the card into her hand, "call me." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." His eyes held hers. Men like him count on isolation, on their victims being too ashamed or scared to reach out. Don't give him that advantage. 2. The elevator slowed, approaching the lobby. Mila clutched the business card, her thumb rubbing across the raised letters of his name. "Why would you help me? You don't know me. This isn't your problem." "Maybe I'm tired of watching people suffer when I have the resources to help." He moved toward the doors, his tall frame casting a shadow across the brushed brass. "Or maybe I just really hate seeing control passed off as concern." 1. The elevator chimed. The doors began to open. Mila could see the lobby beyond, the marble floors, the fountain, the afternoon light streaming through massive windows. Normal, safe, except she knew Evan was out there somewhere, waiting. "Dante." He looked back at her. "Thank you for everything." "Keep the card, Mila." His voice dropped lower. "And if you decide you want something more than running and hoping, call me. I can make problems disappear." The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. Not threatening, not cruel, just absolute, certain, like he was stating a fact about gravity or time. Then he stepped out of the elevator, his stride confident and unhurried. Mila watched him cross the lobby, watched heads turn to track his progress, watched staff straighten their postures as he passed. Power moved with him like a visible force. She waited until he disappeared into a private corridor before stepping out herself. Her eyes scanned the lobby, searching for sandy hair and expensive suits. Nothing. The concierge station stood empty of anyone except staff. The seating areas held different people than before. Either Evan had given up, or he was waiting somewhere less obvious. Mila didn't intend to find out which. She moved quickly toward the service corridor, her baker's clogs squeaking slightly on the marble. The ruined box of eclairs still sat where she'd dropped it, now surrounded by apologetic hotel staff. She slipped past them, through the door marked staff only, and into the warren of service hallways that would take her out the back entrance. Only when she was 2 blocks away, rain soaking through her whites, did she let herself stop, let herself breathe, let herself look at the business card still clutched in her fist. Dante Moretti. She pulled out her phone and typed the name into a search engine. The results made her breath catch. Real estate developer, hotel chain owner, philanthropist. The photos showed him at charity galas, restaurant openings, ribbon cuttings, always in that same perfectly cut suit, always with that same contained expression. But the articles hinted at more. Connections in industries that didn't typically overlap. A reputation for solving problems before they became public. Rumors of influence that extended far beyond property development. One headline caught her eye. Moretti's touch. How one man became untouchable in Manhattan's elite circles. Mila stared at her phone, rain dripping down the screen. She'd crashed into someone powerful, someone dangerous maybe. Someone who'd looked at her situation and seen exactly what it was. Not drama or overreaction, but a woman trying to escape something that was slowly killing her. Someone who'd offered to make problems disappear. The smart thing would be to throw away the card, to forget about the man in the elevator and handle this herself. Keep running, keep hiding, keep hoping. But as Mila walked through the rain toward the subway, she thought about Evan's grip on her wrist. His voice saying, "Don't I deserve closure?" the way he'd found her despite every precaution she'd taken. And she thought about Dante's eyes, dark and certain and absolutely unafraid. She slipped the business card into her pocket, just in case. Back at the patisserie, Andre took one look at her bedraggled appearance and sent her home early. Mila rode the train to her tiny Brooklyn apartment in a daze, still feeling the ghost of Evan's fingers on her skin, still hearing Dante's voice. I can make problems disappear. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Small, sparse, but hers. No one screaming about the dishes in the sink. No one tracking her phone. No one making her feel guilty for existing in a way that didn't center them. She'd built this life from nothing, from 3 bags and a Metro card, and the desperate hope that somewhere in this massive city she could be invisible enough to be safe. But maybe safety wasn't the same as freedom. Mila pulled out Dante's card again, studying it in the lamplight. Such a simple thing. Just a name and a number. An offer with implications she barely understood. She thought about what he'd said about his mother, about the promise he'd made, about recognizing patterns. Then she thought about her bakery. Not as a distant dream, but as something close enough to touch. Something she'd kept locked away because Evan had convinced her it was selfish, impossible, cute. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart stopped. She opened the message. I know you're reading this. We need to talk. I'm not going anywhere until we do. Emila stared at the words until they blurred. Of course he'd found her number. Of course he wasn't done. Men like Evan never were. They'd convinced themselves they were owed something, explanation, closure, submission, and they'd pursue it with the patience of predators. She could change her number again, move apartments, find a new job, keep running, or her finger hovered over Dante's contact information. If you decide you want something more than running and hoping, call me. It was insane. She barely knew him. He was clearly connected to things she didn't understand. Getting involved with someone like that could complicate her life in ways she couldn't predict. But what was the alternative? Keep shrinking? Keep hiding? Keep letting Evan dictate the shape of her existence, even from a distance? Mila thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, full of dreams and energy and plans. The woman who'd designed an entire bakery on napkins during her lunch breaks, who'd believed in butter and vanilla and home. That woman wouldn't have run forever. That woman would have fought. Before she could overthink it, Mila pulled up Dante's number and typed a message. He won't stop. I don't know what to do. She hit send. 3 minutes later, her phone rang. Dante's name on the screen. Mila answered, her hand shaking slightly. Hello? Where are you? His voice was calm, focused, all business. My apartment. Brooklyn. Are you safe? Is he there? No, but he texted. He knows my new number. He says he's not going anywhere. Silence on the line, but not empty silence. She could practically feel Dante thinking, calculating. Send me your address, he said finally. I'm coming to you. You don't have to. Mila. The way he said her name stopped her protest. Send me the address. We need to talk about options, real ones, not just hoping he'll lose interest. She should say no, should tell him she'd figure it out herself, should maintain the careful distance she'd cultivated from everyone who might ask too many questions. But she was so tired of being careful, so tired of measuring every word and action against the possibility of Evan finding out. She sent the address. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Dante said. Lock your door. Don't answer for anyone but me. He hung up. Mila sat in her quiet apartment, listening to the rain against the windows, holding a phone that connected her to a man who'd appeared in her life like some dark miracle exactly when she'd needed him most. She had no idea what options he had to offer. No idea what getting involved with someone like Dante Moretti would mean for her carefully reconstructed life. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was done running. Whatever came next, she'd face it head on. The pastry chef who'd once designed dream bakeries on napkins was ready to fight for those dreams again. And this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. The silk sheets were cool against Mira's skin when she finally opened her eyes, and for a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed over her like a wave. The gallery. The blood. Dante's hand pressed against her mouth as he whispered those 3 words that had sealed her fate. Don't look back. She sat up slowly, her body aching from the tension of the previous night. The bedroom Dante had given her was larger than her entire studio apartment, decorated in shades of cream and silver that screamed expensive taste. Through the windows, dawn was breaking over the city, painting the skyline in hues of rose and gold. It would have been beautiful if Mira's heart wasn't hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The door opened without warning, and she clutched the sheets to her chest before realizing it was just a woman in a crisp black uniform carrying a tray. "Good morning, Miss Castellano," the woman said with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. Caruso asked me to bring you breakfast. He'll be waiting for you in his office when you're ready." Mira wanted to correct her, to say that her name was Chen, not Castellano, but the words died in her throat. The woman set the tray on the bedside table and disappeared as quietly as she'd arrived, leaving Mira alone with her racing thoughts and a breakfast she couldn't imagine eating. She forced herself to shower and dress in the clothes someone had laid out for her, a simple black dress that fit perfectly despite no one asking her size. When she finally made her way down the hallway following the woman's directions, she found Dante standing before a wall of monitors, his profile sharp as cut glass in the morning light. "You should eat something," he said without turning around. "It's going to be a long day." "I'm not hungry." Mira's voice sounded steadier than she felt. "I want answers. You said you'd explain everything." Dante finally looked at her, and something flickered in those dark eyes. Regret, maybe. Or something close to it. He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk, and Mira sat, her spine straight, refusing to show the fear crawling up her throat. "The man at the gallery," Dante began, moving to pour himself a drink despite the early hour. His name was Marco Vitelli. He worked for the Rossi family, one of the organizations that's been trying to muscle into my territory for the past 6 months. "Your territory," Mira repeated, the words tasting bitter. "You mean illegal operations, drug trafficking, weapons, whatever else mob bosses deal in." "I deal in protection," Dante corrected, his tone hardening. "I provide security for businesses that the police ignore. I settle disputes that would otherwise end in bloodshed. The drugs, the weapons, that's Rossi's game, not mine." "And that makes you better?" Mira's laugh was sharp. "You still killed that man. I watched you do it." "I killed him because he was there to kill you." Dante set his glass down with enough force to make Mira flinch. "The moment you walked into that gallery wearing my name, you became a target. Rossi wanted to send me a message, and hurting someone I care about was the clearest way to do it." The words hung between them, heavy with implications Mira wasn't ready to examine. She stood abruptly, pacing to the windows to put distance between them. "You don't know me," she said to her reflection in the glass. "We met at a charity event 3 weeks ago. We've had coffee twice. That doesn't mean you care about me. Doesn't it?" His voice was closer now, and Mira could see his reflection joining hers in the window. "I've spent 3 weeks learning everything about you, Mira. Your morning routine, your favorite coffee shop, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating on a painting. I know you're an orphan who aged out of foster care at 18. I know you work 3 jobs to keep your studio and still donate to the children's shelter on 5th Street every month. I know you're terrified of ending up invisible again, forgotten, like you were as a kid." Mira spun to face him, anger and something dangerously close to tears burning in her chest. "You had me investigated?" "I have everyone investigated." Dante's expression was unreadable. "It's how I stay alive. But with you, it became something else. I wanted to know you, Mira. Not just the facts in a file, but the person who creates beauty in a world this ugly." "Stop," Mira whispered. "Stop talking like this is some romantic story. You're a criminal, and I'm a witness to murder, and there's nothing beautiful about any of this." "You're right." Dante stepped back, his mask sliding into place so smoothly it made Mira's chest ache, which is why you need to understand the reality of your situation. Marco Vitelli's body was found this morning in the river. The police will investigate, but they won't find anything that leads back to me. What they will find is security footage from the gallery showing you leaving with me. Your name is in the guest book. People saw us together. The implications crashed over Mira like ice water. They'll think I'm involved with you, with your organization. They'll know you're involved with me, Dante corrected. The Rossi family certainly knows. Which means you can't go back to your life, Mira. Your apartment isn't safe. Your studio isn't safe. Anywhere you used to be, they'll be watching and waiting. Mira sank back into the chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. This couldn't be happening. 24 hours ago, her biggest worry was whether she'd finish her commissioned piece on time. Now she was trapped in a penthouse with a man who killed people and talked about it like discussing the weather. There has to be another way, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. Witness protection or something. I could testify. Testify to what? Dante's smile was bitter. You didn't see what happened before I pulled you into that room. You don't know why Marco was there or what he was planning. All you saw was me defending myself and you from a threat. And even if you did testify, you'd be signing your own death warrant. The Rossi family has people everywhere, including inside the police department. You'd be dead before the trial even started. The casual way he said it made Mira's stomach turn. She thought of her small apartment with its drafty windows and secondhand furniture, the studio space she'd fought so hard to afford, the life she'd built from nothing with her own 2 hands. All of it gone in one night because she'd accepted an invitation from a man with dark eyes and a dangerous smile. How long? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How long do I have to stay here? Dante moved to the window, his reflection joining hers again in the glass. Until it's safe. Until I've dealt with the Rossi situation and made it clear that you're untouchable. And if it's never safe? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Mira closed her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. She wouldn't cry, not in front of him. She'd learned long ago that tears didn't change anything, didn't make social workers find you a better home, or make foster parents decide to keep you. Tears were weakness, and Mira had survived 26 years by being anything but weak. I need my art supplies, she said finally, opening her eyes to meet Dante's gaze in the window's reflection. If I'm going to be a prisoner here, at least let me work. Something shifted in Dante's expression, a crack in the armor he wore so well. You're not a prisoner, Mira. You're under my protection. There's a difference. Is there? She turned to face him directly. Because it feels an awful lot like I don't have a choice. You don't, Dante admitted, and the honesty in his voice was somehow worse than a lie would have been. But I'll make sure you have everything you need. Give me a list, and I'll have it delivered today. Mira wanted to refuse, to tell him she didn't want anything from him, but that would be cutting off her nose to spite her face. Art was the only thing that had ever kept her sane, the only language she spoke fluently when words failed her. If she was going to survive this, she'd need her brushes and canvases like other people needed air. Fine, she said, moving toward the door. I'll write it down. Mira. Dante's voice stopped her at the threshold. I know you don't believe me, but I will keep you safe, whatever it takes. She looked back at him, this man who'd pulled her into his world without asking permission, who looked at her like she was something precious, even as he talked about murder and territory wars like it was just business. There was something in his eyes that made her chest tight, a vulnerability he probably didn't show anyone else. You should have let me leave the gallery, she said quietly. Before all of this. You should have let me walk away. I couldn't. The words were simple, honest. From the moment I saw you, walking away stopped being an option. Mira left before he could say anything else, before the dangerous warmth in his voice could make her forget that he was a killer and she was trapped. She found her way back to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking as she pulled out the phone Dante had given her to replace the one he'd made her leave behind. She wanted to call someone, but who? She had friends, other artists and waitresses from the diner where she worked weekends, but none of them were close enough to understand this. None of them could help her anyway, and involving them would only put them in danger. The isolation crashed over her, familiar and suffocating. This was what her childhood had felt like, moving from home to home, never belonging anywhere, always on the outside looking in. She'd thought she'd escaped that feeling when she'd finally gotten her own place, built her own life. But here she was again, alone and dependent on someone else's mercy. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral. The same woman from earlier entered, this time carrying an armful of shopping bags. Mr. Caruso thought you might want some clothes that are actually yours, she said, setting the bags on the bed. I guessed at your size, but if anything doesn't fit, just let me know. Mira stared at the designer labels peeking out from the tissue paper. I can't accept these. With respect, Miss Castellano, you don't have much choice. The woman's smile was sympathetic now, genuine. I'm Rosa, by the way. I manage the household staff. If you need anything while you're here, just ask. I need to leave, Mira said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I need my life back. Rosa's expression softened, and she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. I've worked for Mr. Caruso for 5 years. In that time, I've seen him make a lot of decisions, some good, some questionable, but I've never seen him bring someone here. This penthouse, it's his sanctuary. The fact that he's sharing it with you, protecting you, that means something. It means I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe, Rosa acknowledged, or maybe it means he sees something in you worth protecting. Mr. Caruso, he's not a good man by most people's standards, but he's not a monster either. He has his own code, his own rules. And once you're under his protection, he'll move heaven and earth to keep you safe. Mira wanted to argue, to say that she didn't want protection from a man who solved problems with violence, but the words stuck in her throat. Because part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, had felt safer last night in Dante's arms than she'd felt in years. I'll leave you to settle in, Rosa said, rising from the bed. Dinner is at 7, if you'd like to join Mr. Caruso. Otherwise, I can bring something to your room. When Rosa left, Mira pulled one of the dresses from the shopping bags. It was beautiful, a deep emerald that would bring out the green flecks in her eyes, the kind of thing she'd admire in shop windows but never buy. The price tag was still attached, and Mira's eyes widened at the number. This single dress cost more than she made in a month. She hung it in the closet and pulled out her phone, opening a blank note to start listing her art supplies. But her fingers hovered over the screen, and instead she found herself typing something else entirely. How do you know if you're making a deal with the devil or accepting help from an angel? She deleted it immediately, feeling foolish, but the question lingered. Because Dante Caruso was offering her protection, safety, everything she'd never had growing up. But the price was her freedom, her independence, all the things she'd fought so hard to build. The day passed in a strange limbo. Mira explored the penthouse, finding a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a home gym that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, and a terrace garden that shouldn't have been possible 40 stories above the city. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of wealth beyond imagination, a life so far removed from her own it might as well have been on another planet. She avoided Dante, catching only glimpses of him through doorways as he moved through the space with the confidence of a man who owned the world. Once their eyes met across the hallway, and Mira felt that same electric pull that had drawn her to him at the charity event. It terrified her how much she wanted to walk toward him instead of away. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around, Mira had worked herself into a state of anxiety that made her hands shake. She'd changed into one of the dresses Rosa had brought, telling herself it was only practical since all her clothes were back at an apartment she couldn't access. But when she caught her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress transformed her, made her look sophisticated and elegant, like she belonged in this world of penthouses and private security. It was a lie, but it was a beautiful one. Dante was waiting in the dining room, standing by the windows with a glass of wine in his hand. He turned when she entered, and the look on his face made Mira's breath catch. It was hunger and admiration and something deeper, something that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "It's your money," Mira replied, aiming for casual but landing somewhere near defensive. "I'm just wearing it. You could be wearing a paper bag and you'd still be the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Dante moved to pull out her chair, and Mira sat because refusing felt petty. "I'm glad you decided to join me." Rosa said it was dinner or stay in my room like a sulking teenager, Mira said. "I chose the option with food." Dante's lips quirked into something almost like a smile as he took his seat across from her. "Rosa knows me well enough to know I don't handle rejection gracefully." A staff member Mira hadn't met appeared with the first course, Some kind of soup that smelled incredible and probably cost more than Mira's weekly grocery budget. They ate in silence for a moment, the tension between them thick enough to cut. I had your art supplies delivered to the empty room next to yours, Dante said finally. It has good light. I thought you could use it as a studio. Mira set down her spoon, surprised despite herself. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Dante's eyes met hers across the table. You're giving up your life because of me. The least I can do is make sure you can keep creating. I'm giving up my life because someone tried to kill me, Mira corrected. You're just the reason why. Fair enough. Dante took a sip of his wine, and Mira noticed the way his fingers tightened around the glass. I spoke with my security team today. The Rossi family knows you're here. They're watching the building. Fear spiked through Mira's chest. What does that mean? It means they're testing me, seeing how serious I am about protecting you. They're hoping I'll slip up, make a mistake that gives them an opening. Dante's expression hardened. They're going to be disappointed. How can you be so calm about this? Mira demanded. They want to kill me to get to you, and you're sitting here drinking wine like it's just another Tuesday. Because showing fear is showing weakness, Dante replied. And weakness gets you killed in my world. I learned that lesson a long time ago. Mira studied him across the table, this man who'd turned her life upside down, and saw something beneath the cold exterior. Pain, maybe, or the ghost of the person he'd been before this life claimed him. How did you end up here? She asked quietly. Running a criminal organization, living behind bulletproof glass. This can't be what you wanted as a kid. Dante was quiet for so long Mira thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his glass and leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. My father was a baker, he said finally. We had a small shop in Little Italy. He made the best cannoli in the city, and people would line up around the block on Sundays. I used to help him before school, measuring flour and rolling dough. The image was so at odds with the man before her that Mira couldn't quite reconcile them. Dante Caruso feared Mob Boss as a boy covered in flour. What happened? She asked. The Moretti family happened. Dante's voice was flat now, emotionless. They wanted protection money. My father refused to pay, said he'd rather close the shop than fund criminals. So they burned it down with him inside. I was 14, hiding in the alley where my father had shoved me when he saw them coming. I watched it burn and did nothing. Mira's throat tightened. You were a child. There was nothing you could have done. I know that now, Dante acknowledged. But at 14, all I knew was that I'd been powerless to save the person I loved most. So I made sure I'd never be powerless again. I started running errands for the Romano family, worked my way up, learned the business. By the time I was 25, I'd taken over their operation and expanded into territories the old guard never dreamed of touching. And your mother? Mira asked softly. She died 6 months after my father. The doctor said it was her heart, but I knew better. She died of a broken heart, of losing the man she'd loved for 30 years. Dante's fingers traced the rim of his wine glass. I was 16 when I buried her, and I swore over her grave that I'd build an empire that would make sure no one could ever hurt me the way the Morettis hurt my family. The silence that followed was heavy with ghosts and old pain. Mira understood now, in a way she hadn't before, why Dante had built these walls around himself, why he lived in a fortress and trusted no one. They weren't so different, she and this mob boss. Both orphans, both survivors, both determined never to be vulnerable again. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it, for what happened to your family. Don't be, Dante's mask slid back into place. It made me who I am, and who I am is someone who can keep you safe. By trapping me in a gilded cage? By keeping you alive. Dante leaned forward, his intensity pinning her in place. You think I want this, Mira? You think I enjoy knowing that caring about you puts a target on your back? I should have stayed away from you at that charity event. I saw you across the room and knew you were trouble, knew you'd complicate everything. But I couldn't help myself. Why? Mira's voice was barely a whisper. Why me? Dante stood abruptly, moving to the windows to stare out at the city lights. Because when I look at you, I see something I thought I'd lost. Hope, beauty. The possibility that there's more to life than power and territory and blood. You create art, Mira. You bring beauty into the world while I destroy it. And for 3 weeks, every time I saw you, I got to pretend I was someone who deserved to be in your presence. Mira rose from her chair, her heart pounding as she crossed to stand beside him. This close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. "I'm not some angel," she said quietly. "I'm just a woman who paints because it's the only thing I know how to do. Don't put me on a pedestal, Dante. I'll only disappoint you." He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "You could never disappoint me. You're everything I'm not, everything I gave up when I chose this life." "Then why choose it?" Mira asked. "If you hate it so much, why not walk away?" "Because people depend on me," Dante replied. "The businesses I protect, the families who work for me, the neighborhood I grew up in. I walk away, and everything falls apart. The Rossis or someone like them moves in, and it becomes a war zone. At least with me in charge, there are rules, lines that don't get crossed." "Like killing people in art galleries?" Dante flinched, and Mira felt a surge of guilt for the low blow. But she needed him to see the reality of what he was, needed to maintain the distance between them before she did something stupid, like believe the fairy tale he was spinning. "Marco Vitelli was there to hurt you," Dante said quietly. "He had a knife with your name literally engraved on the handle. It was a message, Mira. Rossi wanted me to know he could reach the things I cared about whenever he wanted. So yes, I killed him, and I'd do it again without hesitation, because the alternative was letting him hurt you, and that was never an option." Mira's hand went to her throat, imagining a knife pressed there, and suddenly the dining room felt too small. She backed away from Dante, needing space, needing air, needing anything but the intensity of his gaze. "I should go," she said. "Thank you for dinner." She fled before he could respond, her heels clicking against marble as she hurried back to the safety of her room. Only when the door was closed and locked did she let herself breathe, let herself process everything Dante had told her. A knife with her name on it. Someone had literally been planning to kill her, and Dante had stopped it. She should feel grateful, should see him as her savior. But all she could think about was the casual way he'd described taking a life, like it was just another task on his to-do list. Mira changed out of the expensive dress and into the silk pajamas Rosa had provided, then stood before the window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there was her apartment, her studio, her life. It felt impossibly far away now, like something from a dream she was slowly forgetting. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she opened it. "Sleep well, Mira. Tomorrow we start preparing you for the life you're going to have to live until this is over. It won't be easy, but I'll be with you every step of the way. D." She should delete it, should throw the phone across the room and pretend none of this was happening. Instead, she found herself typing a response. "What kind of life?" The answer came immediately. "One where you're mine and everyone knows it. It's the only way to keep you safe." Mira stared at the words until they blurred, her heart and mind at war. Part of her wanted to fight this, to demand her freedom and independence at any cost. But another part, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, wondered what it would be like to truly belong to someone, to be claimed and protected and wanted with an intensity that burned like fire. She set the phone down without responding and climbed into bed, but sleep was a long time coming. When it finally found her, her dreams were full of dark eyes and dangerous promises, of a life she'd never chosen but couldn't seem to escape. Morning came too quickly, dragging Mira from restless dreams into a reality that felt just as surreal. She found Rosa waiting outside her door with coffee and a knowing look that suggested the entire household staff was aware of how dinner had ended the previous night. "Mr. Caruso is waiting for you in the gym," Rosa said, handing over the steaming cup. "He said to wear something you can move in." Mira wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat ground her. "The gym? Why?" "He didn't say, but when Mr. Caruso gives instructions, we've learned not to question them." Rosa's smile was sympathetic. "There are workout clothes in your closet, second drawer." An hour later, Mira stood in Dante's private gym wearing leggings and a tank top that fit like they'd been made for her, watching him tape his hands with the efficient movements of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. He was shirtless, and Mira tried not to notice the way muscle moved under skin marked with scars that told stories she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. You wanted to see me? She asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Dante looked up, his eyes tracking over her in a way that made heat pool in her stomach. I need to teach you how to defend yourself. If something happens, if somehow someone gets past my security, you need to be able to fight back. I don't want to learn how to fight, Mira protested. I want to go back to my life where the most dangerous thing I faced was accidentally drinking turpentine instead of water. That life doesn't exist anymore. Dante moved toward her with the grace of a predator, all controlled power and lethal intent. I know you don't want to hear it, but ignoring reality won't change it. Someone wants to hurt you to get to me. I need to know you can protect yourself if I'm not there. The thought of Dante not being there sent an unexpected spike of fear through Mira's chest. She'd spent 2 days resenting his presence, his control over her life, but the idea of facing this new dangerous world alone was somehow worse. Fine, she said, lifting her chin. Teach me. What followed was 2 hours of the most frustrating, exhausting, and strangely intimate experience of Mira's life. Dante moved around her, adjusting her stance, positioning her hands, his touch clinical but somehow burning through her skin. He taught her how to strike, where to aim to cause maximum damage, how to use an attacker's momentum against them. Again, he ordered when she fumbled a move for the 3rd time. If someone grabs you from behind, you need to react instinctively. He demonstrated, wrapping his arm around her throat from behind, and Mira's body went rigid. The position was too intimate, too reminiscent of things that had nothing to do with self-defense, and she could feel Dante's breath against her neck, the solid warmth of his chest against her back. Mira, his voice was rough. Focus, stomp on my instep, drive your elbow into my ribs, then twist away. She did as instructed, and Dante released her immediately, pride flickering across his features. Good. Better. You're learning. I'm sweating through clothes that probably cost more than my car, Mira corrected, breathing hard. There's nothing good about this. You're alive and learning how to stay that way, Dante countered. That's everything good about this. They continued until Mira's muscles screamed and her lungs burned, but she refused to ask for a break. Some stubborn part of her needed to prove she could handle this, that she wasn't just some delicate flower who needed constant protection. When Dante finally called an end to the session, Mira was drenched in sweat and shaking from exertion. You did well, Dante said, offering her a towel and water. Most people would have quit after the first hour. Most people aren't trapped in a penthouse with a mob boss teaching them combat skills, Mira shot back, but there was less venom in her voice than before. What happens now? Now you shower and change, Dante replied. Then we have another lesson, one that's just as important as fighting. Mira's stomach dropped. What kind of lesson? How to be seen with me in public without getting either of us killed. 2 hours later, Mira sat in Dante's office wearing another designer dress. This one, a deep navy that Rosa had assured her was appropriate for what Dante had called social combat training. Across from her, Dante was back in his armor of expensive suits and cold authority. The Rossi family is going to be watching everything we do, he began, sliding a tablet across the desk toward her. Every public appearance, every interaction, they'll be analyzing it for weakness. So we need to present a unified front. Make it clear that you're not just some woman I'm protecting, but someone who belongs to me. The possessive language made Mira's hackles rise. I don't belong to anyone. In my world you do. Dante's tone was firm. I know you hate it, and I know it goes against everything you believe about independence and autonomy, but perception is reality in this business. If they think you're just a temporary distraction, they'll wait for me to get bored and then strike. If they believe you're permanent, that I'd go to war over you, they'll think twice. So I'm supposed to what? Pretend to be your girlfriend? Mira's laugh was bitter. Play dress up and smile pretty while you conduct your illegal business? You're supposed to let me protect you in the only way that works, Dante corrected. Starting tonight, I have a meeting with some business associates, legitimate ones who run clubs and restaurants in the city. You're coming with me. Absolutely not, Mira stood abruptly. I'm not going to be paraded around like some trophy while you make deals. You're not a trophy. Dante's voice was hard now. You're a statement. The woman who brought Dante Caruso to his knees, the one thing he values more than power or territory. It's a role, Mira, and you need to play it convincingly. Or what? She challenged. or the Rossi family will keep coming, and eventually they'll succeed. Dante stood as well, moving around the desk to face her. I have enemies, Mira, more than you can imagine. The only thing keeping you safe right now is the threat of what I'd do to anyone who hurts you. But that threat only works if people believe you matter to me, really matter, not just as some passing interest. Mira wanted to argue, to tell him to find another way, but the logic was sound even if she hated it. She thought of the knife with her name engraved on it, of Marco Vitelli's body in the river, of all the ways this could end badly if she didn't play along. What do I have to do? She asked quietly. Relief flickered across Dante's face so quickly she almost missed it. Tonight, you stay by my side. You let me touch you, hold your hand, look at you like you're the only person in the room. You smile and make small talk and act like you're exactly where you want to be. I'm a terrible actress. You don't have to act. Dante's voice softened. Just don't pull away when I reach for you. Don't flinch when I'm close. Let people see that you trust me. But I don't trust you, Iki, Mira said honestly. You've kidnapped me and turned my life upside down. Well, I saved your life and gave you a place in mine, Dante corrected. But I understand the distinction. So tonight, just pretend. Can you do that? Mira met his eyes, dark and intense, and holding secrets she wasn't sure she'd ever fully understand. She thought about her options, which basically consisted of playing along or signing her own death warrant. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. I'll try, she said finally. The restaurant Dante chose was the kind of place Mira had only seen in movies, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths and waiters who moved like dancers. She felt out of place despite the fortune in designer clothes Rosa had dressed her in, hyper-aware of every eye that turned their way as Dante guided her through the room with his hand resting possessively at the small of her back. Relax, he murmured against her ear. You look like you're heading to the guillotine. That's how I feel, Mira muttered back, but she tried to soften her expression to look like a woman on a date rather than a hostage at a business meeting. The table Dante led her to held 3 men, all of them wearing expensive suits and expressions that suggested they were used to getting what they wanted. They stood when Dante approached, respect and wariness mixing in their gazes. Gentlemen, Dante's voice was smooth, businesslike. This is Mira Castellano. Mira, these are the owners of the Sapphire Club, Victor Romano, Marco De Luca, and James Chen. The last name made Mira's head snap up. Chen, like her. The man in question was in his 50s, Chinese-American, and his eyes widened slightly when he looked at her. Chen, he repeated. That's not a common name to hear paired with Castellano. It's complicated, Mira said, finding her voice. Dante's hand tightened slightly at her back, a warning or encouragement, she wasn't sure which. Mira is an artist, Dante said smoothly, pulling out her chair. She's been kind enough to accompany me tonight, despite having better things to do than listen to us discuss business. The men laughed, the tension breaking slightly, and Mira sat with as much grace as she could muster. Dante took the seat beside her, close enough that their legs brushed under the table, and his hand found hers, threading their fingers together in a display of intimacy that made her breath catch. An artist, Victor Romano said, interest clear in his tone. What kind of art? Painting, mostly, Mira replied, grateful for a topic she could discuss without fumbling. Abstract expressionism, some portraiture, whatever calls to me. She's being modest, Dante interjected, his thumb stroking across her knuckles in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a lifeline. Her work was featured in the Meridian Gallery last month. Sold out the first night. That was true, though Mira had no idea how Dante knew it. The fact that he'd researched her work, that he could speak about it with pride in his voice, did something strange to her chest. Impressive, James Chen said, and there was something in his eyes that suggested he saw more than Dante was showing. You must be very talented. I work hard, Mira said carefully. Talent only gets you so far. The rest is persistence and learning to see the world differently. A philosophy I appreciate, James replied, his gaze shifting to Dante. It's good to see you as someone who understands that success is about more than just power. It's about vision. The conversation shifted to business then, Talk of liquor licenses and expansion plans and territory that Mira only half understood. She sipped her wine and tried to look engaged, hyper-aware of Dante's presence beside her, the way he kept her close, touched her hand, her shoulder, her face, small gestures that broadcast ownership to anyone watching. She should have hated it, should have bristled at being treated like a possession. But there was something in the way Dante looked at her between business discussions, something real beneath the performance, that made her wonder if the act was bleeding into reality or if it had been real all along. "You're doing great," Dante whispered during a lull in conversation, his lips brushing her temple. "Just a little longer." Mira nodded, leaning into him slightly, and felt his sharp intake of breath. It was a small victory, knowing she could affect him the way he affected her, even in the middle of this elaborate charade. Dinner arrived, course after perfect course that Mira barely tasted. She made small talk when required, smiled at the right moments, played the role of devoted companion so well that she almost convinced herself. But underneath the performance, her mind was racing, trying to reconcile the man beside her who spoke about protection money and territory disputes with the one who knew her art was in the Meridian Gallery and looked at her like she hung the moon. "I need some air," she murmured to Dante when dessert was served. "The powder room?" He rose immediately, helping her from her chair like a gentleman. "I'll walk you." "I'm capable of finding a bathroom by myself," Mira said, but kept her voice light, playful almost. "Humor me," Dante replied, his hand at her back again, as he guided her through the restaurant. Once they were in the hallway, away from prying eyes, his demeanor shifted. "Are you okay? This is a lot, I know." "I'm fine," Mira said, and was surprised to find it was partly true. "Just needed a break from performing." "You're not performing," Dante said quietly. "You're being yourself. That's all I need from you, Mira. Just be yourself, and let me stand beside you." Before she could respond, the bathroom door opened and a woman emerged, stunning in red silk with diamonds at her throat. She stopped when she saw them, her eyes widening in recognition. "Dante Caruso," she purred, her gaze sliding to Mira with barely concealed disdain. "I heard rumors you'd been tamed, but I didn't believe them. Who's your little friend?" "Sophia." Dante's voice was cold enough to frost glass. "This is Mira, and she's not my friend. She's mine. Remember that when you report back to your father." The woman's expression flickered, something dangerous moving behind her eyes. "My father doesn't care about your romantic entanglements, Dante. Though I'm surprised you'd risk bringing her out in public. It's bold, claiming something so fragile." "Everything I claim, I protect," Dante said, moving closer to Mira in a gesture that was pure possession. "And anyone who thinks fragile means weak will learn exactly how wrong they are. Won't they, Sophia?" The threat hung in the air between them, and Sophia's smile turned sharp. "We'll see. Enjoy your evening, Dante. I hope she's worth what's coming." She brushed past them, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and unspoken threats in her wake. Mira waited until she was gone before turning to Dante. "Who was that?" "Sophia Rossi." Dante's jaw was tight. "The daughter of the man who wants you dead, and she just confirmed that tonight was a test." Fear spiked through Mira's veins. "Did I pass?" Dante cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the storm in his eyes. "You were perfect, but this game just got more dangerous. The Rossis know exactly how much you mean to me now." "And how much is that?" Mira asked before she could stop herself. For a long moment, Dante just looked at her, and Mira saw layers of emotion flicker across his face too quickly to name. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, the gesture tender and devastating all at once. "More than is smart," he admitted. "More than I should. More than I can afford in this life I've built. But I can't seem to help myself where you're concerned." Mira's hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath expensive fabric. "Dante, this can't be real. We barely know each other. This is just adrenaline and proximity and playing pretend." "Is it?" His hand slid into her hair, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "Because it feels pretty damn real to me. It felt real when I first saw you at that charity event, wearing a dress you'd probably saved for months to buy, looking at the art like it held all the answers to the universe. It felt real when I had my people research you and found out you'd overcome more in 26 years than most people face in a lifetime. And it sure as hell felt real when I killed a man to keep him from touching you." "Stop," Mira whispered, her eyes burning. "You're making this impossible." "Good," Dante said fiercely, "because walking away from you is impossible too." "I tried, Mira. After that first coffee, I told myself it was a bad idea, that you deserved better than a man with blood on his hands and enemies at every door. But then I'd see you at the coffee shop near your studio, painting in the window with sunlight in your hair, and I'd have to talk to you. Had to know you. Had to make you mine before I even understood what that meant." Mira closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of his confession, by the way her body was responding to his proximity. "This is insane. You're a criminal, and I'm just trying to survive. There's no future here." "Then we'll make the present count," Dante said, and then his lips were on hers, swallowing her protest in a kiss that tasted like wine and want, and something that felt dangerously like forever. Mira should have pushed him away, should have maintained the distance that kept her safe, but her hands fisted in his shirt instead, pulling him closer as she kissed him back with all the confusion and fear and desire that had been building since the moment he'd pulled her into that gallery room and changed her life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mira rested her forehead against his chest. "We can't do this." "We already are," Dante's voice was rough. "But you're right. Not here, not now. We need to get through this dinner, and then we'll figure out what comes next." He stepped back, smoothing her hair with gentle hands, and Mira caught a glimpse of them in the hallway mirror. They looked like a couple, she realized. Two people who belonged together, who fit in a way that had nothing to do with logic or sense. It was an illusion, but it was a beautiful one. They returned to the table, and if the men noticed the flush in Mira's cheeks, or the way Dante's hand never left her, they were polite enough not to comment. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of conversation and barely touched food, and by the time Dante's driver pulled up to take them home, Mira was exhausted from the weight of pretending. The drive back to the penthouse was silent, tension thick between them. Mira stared out the window at the city lights, trying not to think about the kiss, about the way Dante had looked at her like she was something precious and breakable and worth protecting at any cost. "That went well," Dante said finally. "You were incredible tonight, Mira. Natural and charming and exactly what I needed people to see." "I'm glad I could play my part," Mira replied, keeping her voice neutral. "It wasn't a part," Dante said quietly. "That's the problem. With you, none of it feels like pretending." Mira turned to look at him, this man who'd crashed into her life like a hurricane and expected her to simply weather the storm. "What do you want from me, Dante? Really?" "Everything," he admitted. "I want you to stop looking at me like I'm the enemy. I want you to see that I'm trying to keep you alive, even if my methods aren't perfect. I want to know what you're thinking when you stare out windows at 2 a.m. I want to watch you paint and understand how you translate emotion into color. I want everything you're willing to give and things you're probably not." "That's not fair," Mira whispered. "You can't just say things like that and expect me not to feel something." "Why not?" Dante's eyes were intense in the dim light of the car. "You think I don't know this is complicated? You think I don't understand that I'm asking you to care about a man who solves problems with violence and lives behind bulletproof glass? But I can't help what I feel, Mira, and I think you feel it too, whether you want to admit it or not." The car pulled up to the building before Mira could formulate a response, and Dante was out and opening her door before she could gather her thoughts. His hand was warm and steady as he helped her out, and Mira was acutely aware of his security team flanking them as they entered the building. The elevator ride was silent, charged with things neither of them seemed ready to say. When they reached the penthouse, Mira headed straight for her room, needing space to think, to breathe, to process everything that had happened. "Mira, wait," Dante called after her. She stopped but didn't turn around. "I can't do this tonight, Dante. I just need to be alone." "I know." His voice was closer now. "But I need you to understand something. What happened tonight, Sophia Rossi seeing us together, it's going to accelerate things. Her father will move faster now, make his play sooner. So tomorrow, we're going to start getting you ready for what's coming." Mira finally turned to face him. "And what exactly is coming?" Dante's expression was grim. "War. The Rossis won't let this stand. They'll come at us. And when they do, I need to know you're prepared, that you can handle yourself if things go wrong." "Things are already wrong," Mira said. "My entire life is wrong right now." "I know." Dante stepped closer, his hand reaching up to cup her cheek. "And I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry for keeping you alive, and I'm not sorry for wanting you. Those are the only two things I'm certain of anymore." Mira leaned into his touch despite herself, craving the warmth and steadiness he offered, even as her mind screamed warnings. "This is going to end badly. You know that, right?" "Maybe," Dante agreed. "Or maybe we'll surprise ourselves. Either way, I'm not letting you face it alone." He kissed her forehead again, that same tender gesture from the restaurant, and then stepped back before Mira could do something stupid, like ask him to stay. "Get some rest," he said softly. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Mira watched him walk away, disappearing into his own wing of the penthouse, and wondered how her life had become something out of a crime novel. She locked herself in her room and changed into pajamas, then stood at the window staring out at the city that used to be hers. Somewhere out there, the Rossi family was planning their next move. Somewhere out there, people wanted her dead for the crime of mattering to Dante Caruso. And here she was, trapped in a penthouse with a man who killed people and kissed her like she was oxygen, unable to tell if what she felt was real or just a product of circumstance. Her phone buzzed with the message from Dante. "You're not alone in this, even when it feels like you are. Sleep well, Mira. Tomorrow, we fight back." She stared at the words until they blurred, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Finally, she typed a response. "I'm scared." His reply came immediately. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But I'm scared too, if it helps. Scared of losing you. Scared of what I'd become if something happened to you. We can be scared together." Mira climbed into bed, clutching the phone like a lifeline, and let herself admit the truth she'd been avoiding. Dante Caruso was dangerous, yes. But what terrified her most wasn't the violence or the criminal empire or the enemies at the gate. It was how quickly she was starting to care about him, how his presence had become something she looked for rather than feared. She was falling for her captor, her protector, her undoing, and there didn't seem to be anything she could do to stop it. Sleep finally claimed her somewhere around 3 in the morning, her dreams full of dark eyes and dangerous promises and the feeling of being caught between two worlds with no clear path forward. When morning light finally pulled Mira from restless sleep, she found Rosa waiting outside her door with coffee and an expression that suggested the day ahead would be anything but ordinary. "Mr. Caruso asked me to tell you he's handling some business this morning," Rosa said, her tone carefully neutral. "He'll meet you in the studio at noon. He also said you should paint if you need to clear your head." Mira took the coffee gratefully, the warm ceramic mug grounding her scattered thoughts. "Did he say what kind of business?" "The kind that's better not knowing about," Rosa replied with a small smile. "But he left you something. It's in the studio." Curiosity pulled Mira down the hallway to the room Dante had converted for her use. She pushed open the door and stopped short, her breath catching in her throat. The space was perfect, flooded with natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows, her supplies arranged exactly as she would have done it herself. But it was the canvas waiting on the easel that made her chest tighten. It was blank, pristine white, and full of possibility, but pinned to the corner was a note in Dante's precise handwriting. "Paint what you're feeling. No one else has to see it. Sometimes the only way through the chaos is to put it on canvas. I'll understand if I'm the monster in your art today." Mira's fingers traced the words, something warm and dangerous unfurling in her chest. He understood. This man who solved problems with violence and lived by rules she couldn't comprehend, somehow understood that she needed to create, needed to translate the turmoil inside her into something tangible. She changed into old paint-stained clothes that someone had retrieved from her apartment, tied her hair back, and lost herself in the familiar ritual of preparing her palette. The first brushstroke was always the hardest, that moment of commitment when blank possibility became something real. But once she started, the world fell away. Colors bled across the canvas, angry reds and deep purples, slashes of black that could have been shadows or bars, or the outline of a cage. But threaded through the chaos were moments of gold, touches of warmth that spoke to something she wasn't ready to name. She painted without thinking, letting her subconscious guide her hand, and slowly an image emerged that was both terrifying and beautiful. Two figures, abstracted but recognizable, caught in a dance that could have been combat or embrace. One dark and angular, all sharp edges and contained power. The other softer, surrounded by light, but reaching toward the darkness rather than away from it. Between them, the space was charged with energy, with tension, with the kind of pull that defied logic or sense. Mira was so absorbed she didn't hear the door open, didn't sense Dante's presence until he spoke. "It's incredible." His voice was quiet, reverent, terrifying and hopeful all at once. She spun around, paintbrush still in hand, and found him standing in the doorway watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. He changed from his business clothes into dark jeans and a black shirt, looking more human than she'd seen him, less like the untouchable crime boss and more like a man who carried too much weight on his shoulders. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious about the mess she'd made, paint on her hands and probably her face. "Long enough to watch you work." Dante moved into the room, his eyes never leaving the canvas. "You get this look when you paint, like you're somewhere else entirely, somewhere the rest of us can't reach." "That's kind of the point." Mira set down her brush, wiping her hands on a rag. "Art is the only place I've ever felt completely safe, where I get to control the narrative instead of being controlled by it." "And what's the narrative here?" Dante gestured to the painting, moving close enough that Mira could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. She looked at the canvas, seeing it through his eyes, and felt vulnerability wash over her. "I think you know." "Tell me anyway." His voice was low, intimate. "I want to hear you say it." Mira's throat was tight, but she forced the words out. "It's us, or what we could be if the world wasn't trying to kill us. Two people who shouldn't work together, but somehow do. Light and dark, creation and destruction, all tangled up until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins." Dante was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving between her and the painting like he was trying to memorize both. Then he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his fingers. "You see the good in me," he said quietly. "Even after everything, even knowing what I am, you still painted light around me. Why?" "Because it's there," Mira admitted, "buried under all the violence and the empire building and the walls you've constructed. I see it when you talk about your parents, when you make sure I have everything I need, when you look at me like I'm something precious instead of a problem to solve." "You are precious," Dante's hand cupped her face. "And you are a problem, the best kind. The kind that makes me question everything I've built, everything I've become. You make me want things I gave up on a long time ago." "Like what?" Mira asked, leaning into his touch despite every instinct screaming at her to maintain distance. "A life that's about more than survival." Dante's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Someone to come home to who sees me as more than just the monster keeping other monsters at bay. A future that doesn't end in blood and betrayal." Mira's hand came up to cover his, her paint-stained fingers stark against his skin. "Dante, you can't put that on me. I'm not your salvation. I'm just a woman who got caught in your world by accident." "There are no accidents," he said firmly. "You were at that charity event because your art was being featured. I was there because I donate to that children's shelter you give money to every month. We were always going to meet, Mira. Maybe not that night, but eventually. The universe has a sick sense of humor that way." Before Mira could respond, Dante's phone buzzed insistently. He pulled it out, his expression darkening as he read the message. "What is it?" Mira asked, fear spiking through her. "The Rossis just made their move." Dante's voice was hard now, all business. "They hit one of my warehouses on the east side. No casualties, but they left a message. They want a meeting. Is that good or bad?" "Depends on what they're offering." Dante was already moving toward the door, his whole demeanor shifting into something lethal and focused. "Stay here. Don't leave the penthouse for any reason. I'm doubling security, and Rosa will be with you the entire time I'm gone." "Wait." Mira caught his arm. "You're going to meet with people who want to kill you?" "They want to negotiate," Dante corrected. "The warehouse hit was a show of strength, proving they can reach my assets. Now they'll offer terms, probably demand I hand you over, or pay them compensation for the insult of killing Marco Vitelli." The casual way he said it made Mira's stomach turn. And what are you going to tell them? Dante turned back to face her fully, and the look in his eyes was pure steel. That you're not negotiable. That any deal that involves hurting you is off the table before we even start talking. And if they push, I'll remind them exactly why people fear the Caruso name. You're going to start a war over me, Mira whispered. I'm going to end one, Dante corrected. The Rossis have been pushing boundaries for months. This situation with you, it's just the excuse they needed to make their play. Better to deal with it now, on my terms, than let it fester. He pulled her close, pressing a fierce kiss to her forehead. I'll be back before dinner. Paint something beautiful while I'm gone. Give me something to look forward to coming home to. Then he was gone, leaving Mira alone in the studio with her painting and the terrifying realization that she desperately wanted him to come home safe. She returned to the canvas, trying to lose herself in color and form, but her mind kept wandering to Dante sitting across from the Rossi family, negotiating her life like it was just another business transaction. Hours passed in a blur of paint and anxiety. Rosa appeared periodically with food Mira couldn't eat and reassurances that meant nothing. The sun tracked across the sky, and still Dante didn't return. Mira's hands shook as she added detail to the painting, trying to capture the exact shade of Dante's eyes, the way he looked at her like she was the only real thing in his world. When her phone finally rang with an unknown number, Mira nearly dropped it in her haste to answer. Hello? Mira Castellano, a woman's voice purred, and Mira recognized it immediately. Sofia Rossi. We haven't been properly introduced, but I feel like we already know each other so well. Ice flooded Mira's veins. How did you get this number? Please, Sofia laughed. You think Dante Caruso is the only one with resources? I've known everything about you since the moment you became interesting to him. I know where you grew up, every foster home that didn't want you, every failed relationship, every time you couldn't pay rent and had to choose between food and art supplies. You're nobody, Mira. A little orphan playing dress-up in a world you don't understand. Mira's fingers tightened on the phone. What do you want? I want you to understand something, Sofia's tone turned serious. My father is in a meeting with Dante right now, offering very generous terms. All Dante has to do is step back, let us expand into his northern territories, and forget about you. Simple, clean, everyone walks away. Dante won't agree to that. No, he won't, Sofia agreed, because he's too proud and too stupid and too caught up in whatever fantasy he's built around you. So people are going to die, Mira. Good people, people with families and children, all because Dante Caruso can't let go of his newest toy. I'm not a toy, Mira said through gritted teeth. Aren't you? Sofia challenged. You think you're special? You think you're the first woman to catch his eye? Dante goes through women like other men go through suits. In 6 months, you'll be a memory, but the war he starts over you will still be killing people. Is that really what you want? Mira's hand found the edge of the canvas, needing something solid to hold on to. If you're trying to convince me to leave, it won't work. I don't have anywhere to go. You have everywhere to go, Sofia corrected. I'm offering you a way out, Mira. Right now, while there's still time. Walk away, disappear, and we'll make sure you're safe. Set up somewhere new, maybe on the West Coast, with enough money to never worry about rent or art supplies again. All you have to do is leave. And if I don't? Then you're signing death warrants. Sofia's voice was cold now. Not just yours, not just Dante's, but everyone caught in the crossfire. The warehouse workers, the restaurant owners, the families who depend on Dante's protection. Their blood will be on your hands, little orphan. Can you live with that? The line went dead before Mira could respond, and she stood frozen in the studio, Sofia's words echoing in her head. She thought about the warehouse that had been hit, about Dante's casual mention of war, about all the people whose lives would be destroyed because she'd accepted a coffee invitation from a man with dangerous eyes. Rosa appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. Miss Castellano? You look pale. Are you all right? Someone just called me. Mira's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Sofia Rossi, she offered me a way out. Rosa's face hardened. Whatever she said, it was lies designed to manipulate you. The Rossis are experts at finding weakness and exploiting it. She said people will die because of me. Mira turned to face Rosa. That Dante's starting a war he can't win, all because he won't let me go. Is that true? Rosa was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Mister, Caruso has been preparing for conflict with the Rossi family for months. You didn't cause this, Mira. You're just the catalyst that forced it to happen now instead of later. That's not better. Mira sank into a chair. That doesn't make me feel less responsible. No, but it's the truth. Rosa moved closer, her tone gentle. The Rossis want you to feel guilty, want you to believe you're the problem, but the real problem is they're trying to take what isn't theirs, and Mr. Caruso won't let them. With or without you in the picture, this war was coming. Mira wanted to believe her, wanted to accept that she wasn't responsible for the violence that was about to explode, but guilt sat heavy in her chest, making it hard to breathe. The sound of the elevator arriving made both women turn. Dante strode into the penthouse, and Mira's heart leapt at the sight of him, whole and unhurt. But the tension in his shoulders, the hard set of his jaw, told her the meeting hadn't gone well. "Leave us," Dante said to Rosa, his eyes never leaving Mira's face. Rosa departed quickly, and then they were alone. Dante crossed to the bar and poured himself a drink, downing it in one swallow before pouring another. "How bad is it?" Mira asked quietly. "The Rossis want blood." Dante's voice was flat. "My blood, your blood. They're not particularly picky. They're insulted that I killed one of theirs, that I'm protecting you instead of handing you over. They offered me a deal that was designed to be refused, just so they could say they tried negotiation before declaring war." "Sophia called me," Mira said, and watched Dante's knuckles go white around his glass. "She offered me money, a new life somewhere far away. If I just disappeared." "And what did you tell her?" Dante's voice was dangerously quiet. "I didn't tell her anything," Mira stood, moving toward him. She hung up before I could respond. "But Dante, she said people are going to die because you won't let me go. She made it sound like I'm the problem, like if I just left, everything would be fine." "She's lying." Dante set down his glass hard enough to crack it. "The Rossis don't want you gone. They want you dead. You're a symbol now, proof that I care about something other than power. As long as you're alive, I have a weakness they can exploit. Sophia was trying to manipulate you into running so they could kill you without me there to protect you." The casual certainty in his voice made Mira shiver. "How do you live like this? Constantly watching for threats, never trusting anyone?" "I trust you," Dante said simply. "And Rosa, and a handful of others I've known for years. Everyone else is a potential enemy until proven otherwise. It's not a good way to live, but it's kept me breathing for 15 years. Mira moved closer, her hand finding his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath expensive fabric. "What happens now?" "Now we prepare." Dante covered her hand with his. "The Rossis will make their move within the next week. They'll come at us hard, trying to prove they're strong enough to challenge me. So I need to show them exactly what happens when someone threatens what's mine. By starting a war. By ending one before it really begins," Dante corrected. "One decisive strike that reminds everyone why they fear me, why crossing the Caruso family is a death sentence." Mira looked up at him, this man who spoke about violence like strategy, who was willing to burn the city down to keep her safe. "I don't want people to die for me." "They're not dying for you." Dante's hand came up to cup her face. "They're dying because they chose to work for an organization that profits from suffering, that preys on the weak. The Rossi family deals in drugs that destroy neighborhoods, in weapons that end up in the hands of kids. They're the monsters, Mira. I'm just the one willing to stop them. By becoming a monster yourself. If that's what it takes," Dante agreed. "I've made peace with what I am. The question is, can you?" Mira searched his eyes, looking for the man she'd painted that morning, the light she'd seen beneath the darkness. "I don't know. Ask me again when this is over." "Fair enough." Dante's thumb traced her lower lip. "But know this, when the Rossis come, I need you to trust me. No matter what you see, no matter what I have to do, trust that I'm doing it to keep you alive." "That's asking a lot." "I know." Dante leaned down until his forehead rested against hers. "But I'm asking anyway. Trust me, Mira. Please." The vulnerability in his voice undid something in Mira's chest. She rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her fear and confusion and desperate hope into the contact. Dante responded immediately, his arms coming around her, holding her like she was the only solid thing in his world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mira rested her head against his chest. "I finished the painting, the one I was working on this morning." "Show me," Dante said, his hand stroking her hair. They walked to the studio together, and Mira watched Dante's face as he took in the completed piece. The two figures were clearer now, their connection unmistakable, caught between combat and embrace in a dance that looked both violent and tender. "Is that how you see us?" Dante asked quietly. "It's how I feel us," Mira corrected. "Like we're caught in something bigger than both of us, pulled together by forces we can't control, fighting each other and fighting for each other all at once." Dante stared at the painting for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I want to buy it. Name your price." "It's not for sale," Mira said immediately. "This one's mine. A reminder that even in chaos there can be beauty." "Then paint me another." Dante pulled her close again. "Something I can look at and remember that there's more to life than the empire I've built. Something that reminds me why I'm fighting. You're fighting because the Rossis challenged you." "No," Dante's eyes were intense. "I'm fighting because they threatened you. There's a difference, Mira. Everything I'm about to do, every choice I'm going to make, it's all about keeping you safe. You're my line in the sand." The weight of his words settled over Mira like a blanket, warm and suffocating all at once. She thought about Sophia's offer, about running away and starting over somewhere the Caruso and Rossi families were just names in the news. But looking at Dante now, seeing the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, she knew she couldn't leave. Not because she was trapped, but because some part of her wanted to stay. "I need you to teach me more," she said suddenly. "Self-defense, how to shoot, whatever I need to know to survive what's coming. I won't be helpless, Dante. If there's going to be a war, I want to be able to fight." Pride and concern warred across Dante's face. "It's dangerous. Once you learn these things, once you cross certain lines, you can't go back to who you were before." "I haven't been who I was before since the moment you pulled me into that gallery room," Mira said firmly. The old Mira, the one who thought the most dangerous thing in her life was a looming rent payment, she doesn't exist anymore. So teach me how to be the new version, the one who survives in your world. Dante studied her for a long moment, and Mira saw the exact second he made his decision. "All right. Starting tomorrow, we train seriously. Not just basic self-defense, but everything. How to handle a weapon, how to read a room for threats, how to survive if something happens to me." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Mira said fiercely. "You don't know that." Dante's smile was sad. "But I appreciate the sentiment. Come on, it's late. You should eat something." They had dinner together, a quiet meal where they talked about everything except the war looming on the horizon. Dante asked about her art, her childhood, the dreams she'd had before his world crashed into hers. Mira found herself talking about things she usually kept buried, the loneliness of foster care, the determination to make something beautiful despite growing up surrounded by ugliness. "You're stronger than you think," Dante said when she'd finished. "Surviving that kind of childhood, it breaks most people. But you turned it into art, into something that brings joy to others. That's not weakness, Mira. That's the kind of strength that actually matters," says the man who runs a criminal empire. "Running an empire just requires ruthlessness and strategy," Dante countered. "What you do, creating beauty in a world determined to crush it, that requires real courage." They finished dinner and stood together on the terrace, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, the Rossi family was planning their attack. Somewhere out there, people were preparing for war. But in this moment, with Dante's arm around her waist and the night air cool against her skin, Mira let herself pretend they were just two people falling for each other under normal circumstances. "I should go to bed," she said finally, reluctantly pulling away. "Tomorrow's going to be intense if you're really going to train me." "I am," Dante confirmed. "And Mira? Thank you." "For what?" "For staying." His hand caught hers, threading their fingers together. "For not running when Sophia gave you the chance. for trusting me enough to learn how to survive in my world instead of demanding I find a way to put you back in yours." Mira squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses and scars that told stories of violence she'd never fully understand. "I'm not staying because I trust you. I'm staying because I can't seem to make myself leave. I don't know if that's better or worse." "It's honest." Dante raised her hand to his lips. "I'll take honest over comfortable lies any day." Mira left him on the terrace and made her way to her room, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. She changed into pajamas and climbed into bed, but sleep felt impossible. Her phone buzzed with a message, and she opened it to find a photo from Dante. It was her painting, the one she'd finished that morning, but he'd photographed it from an angle that caught the late afternoon light streaming through the studio windows. The effect was breathtaking, making the gold threads in the painting shimmer like actual light. "This is how I see us," his message read. "Beautiful even in the chaos. Maybe especially in the chaos. Sleep well, Mira. Tomorrow we start preparing you for war, but tonight, just dream of peace." She stared at the photo until her eyes blurred with tears she wouldn't let fall. This was insane. Caring about a man who solved problems with violence, whose idea of protection involved teaching her to kill. But the heart apparently didn't care about logic or sense, and Mira's heart had made its choice the moment Dante had looked at her like she was worth starting a war over. She typed a response with shaking fingers. "I dream of peace, but I think I'm falling for war. What does that make me?" His answer came quickly. "Human. Complicated. Perfect. It makes you perfect." Mira set the phone down and closed her eyes, letting herself drift toward sleep with the image of their painted figures dancing behind her eyelids. Two people caught between darkness and light, choosing each other despite all the reasons they shouldn't. The next 3 days passed in a blur of training that left Mira's body aching and her mind reeling. Dante was relentless, pushing her through combat drills until her muscles screamed, teaching her to handle weapons with a precision that terrified her. But worse than the physical exhaustion was watching him transform into someone harder, colder, as reports came in about Rossi movements throughout the city. "They're positioning people near your old apartment, your studio, the coffee shop you like," Dante said on the third morning. His voice clipped as he reviewed security footage. "They're waiting for you to make a mistake, to give them an opening." "Then it's a good thing I'm not going anywhere," Mira replied, checking the magazine of the Glock he'd taught her to use. The weight of it still felt wrong in her hands, but she'd gotten good enough to hit center mass on the target range he'd built in the basement. Dante looked up from the monitors, something like pride flickering in his eyes. "You've come a long way in 3 days. Most people would still be flinching every time they pulled the trigger. Most people didn't watch their protector kill someone to save them." Mira set the gun down carefully. "I learned fast that in your world, hesitation gets you killed." "It's not just my world anymore." Dante moved closer, his hand finding her waist. "It's ours. For better or worse, you're part of this now." Before Mira could respond, Dante's phone rang with a tone she'd learned meant urgent business. He answered immediately, his expression darkening as he listened. "When?" he demanded. "How many?" A pause. "No, don't engage. Pull everyone back to defensive positions. I'm on my way." He ended the call and turned to Mira, his face grim. "The Rossis just hit 3 of my businesses simultaneously. Clubs, restaurants, places where civilians could have been hurt. They're escalating, trying to force my hand." "Were people hurt?" Mira's stomach dropped. "Minor injuries, nothing critical, but the message is clear. They're done playing games." Dante pulled her close, pressing a fierce kiss to her forehead. "I need to go handle this. Rosa will stay with you, and I'm leaving Marco and his team for security." "Wait," Mira caught his arm. "Let me come with you. I can help." "Absolutely not." Dante's tone was iron. "This is exactly what they want, to draw you out where they can reach you. You stay here, where it's safe." "While you go start a war?" "While I go end one," Dante corrected. "Trust me, Mira. This is what I'm good at." He left before she could argue further, and Mira was left alone with Rosa and the oppressive silence of the penthouse. She tried to paint, but her hands were shaking too badly to hold a brush. She tried to eat, but everything tasted like ash. All she could do was pace and watch the minutes tick by, imagining 100 different ways this could end badly. Hours passed with no word. The sun set, painting the city in shades of crimson and gold that looked too much like blood and fire. Mira stood at the windows, her phone clutched in her hand, willing it to ring with news that Dante was safe. When the call finally came, it wasn't from Dante. It was from an unknown number that made every instinct scream danger. Miss Castellano, a man's voice, cultured and cold. My name is Antonio Rossi. I believe we need to talk. Mira's heart hammered against her ribs. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do. Antonio's laugh was ugly. Especially since I'm currently watching your boyfriend bleed out in one of my warehouses. Turns out Dante Caruso isn't quite as invincible as he pretends to be. The world tilted sideways, and Mira had to grip the window frame to stay upright. You're lying. Am I? The sound of a phone being moved, and then Dante's voice, rough with pain. Mira, don't listen to him. Don't you dare! The sound of impact, a grunt of pain, and then Antonio was back on the line. As you can hear, he's very much alive, for now. Whether he stays that way depends entirely on you. What do you want? Mira's voice was steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. A trade, Antonio said simply. You for him. Come to the address I'm about to send you, alone, and I'll let Dante go. Refuse, and I'll send him back to you in pieces. How do I know you'll keep your word? You don't, Antonio admitted, but you know for certain what happens if you refuse. The great Dante Caruso, brought down because he was stupid enough to care about a nobody artist. There's a poetry to it, don't you think? The line went dead, and a moment later, an address appeared on her screen. Mira stared at it, her mind racing through options that all ended in blood. She could call Dante's security team, but that would take time they might not have. She could wait for Rosa to check on her and try to slip past, but the building was locked down tight. Or she could do the one thing Dante had explicitly told her never to do. She could trust herself to survive long enough to find a way out. Mira moved quickly, changing into dark clothes and pulling her hair back. She found the gun Dante had given her for practice and checked that it was loaded, her hand steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Then she did something that would either save them both or get them both killed. She called Rosa into the room, and when the older woman's back was turned, brought the heavy base of a lamp down on her head. Rosa crumpled with a soft groan, and Mira caught her before she could hit the floor, lowering her gently and whispering apologies the unconscious woman couldn't hear. I'm sorry, Mira breathed, but I can't let him die for me. She used Rosa's access card to override the elevator, her heart in her throat as the door slid open. The security team in the lobby would be harder to bypass, but Mira had spent 3 days watching them, learning their patterns. She knew there was a service exit that led to the parking garage, monitored but not actively guarded. Getting out of the building was easier than it should have been, and Mira took that as either a good sign or proof that she was walking into a trap. She flagged down a taxi, gave the driver the address Antonio had sent, and watched the city blur past as they drove toward what was almost certainly her death. The warehouse district was exactly as ominous as Mira had imagined, all crumbling brick and broken windows and shadows that seemed to move with malicious intent. She paid the driver and stepped out onto cracked pavement, the weight of the gun tucked into her waistband both comforting and terrifying. I'm here, she called out to the darkness. Let him go. Lights flooded the space, blinding her temporarily, and when her vision cleared, Mira's breath caught. Dante was tied to a chair in the center of the warehouse, his face bloody, his suit torn, but his eyes blazing with fury when he saw her. Mira, no. His voice was raw. What did you do? I saved you, Mira replied, moving toward him before a dozen men materialized from the shadows, guns trained on her from every direction. She stopped, raising her hands slowly. I'm here, Antonio. Let him go like you promised. A man stepped forward from the shadows, silver-haired and distinguished in a way that made the violence he represented even more obscene. Antonio Rossi looked like someone's grandfather, not a crime lord who dealt in death. The little artist has teeth, after all, Antonio smiled. I'm impressed. Dante chose better than I thought. The deal was me for him, Mira said, keeping her voice level. I'm here. Let Dante go. See, here's the problem with that. Antonio circled her like a predator. The deal was always going to end with both of you dead. But I wanted him to watch first, to see what his arrogance cost the woman he loves. Then we'll kill him, and the Caruso Empire will crumble without its king. You think my organization will fall apart just because I'm gone? Dante's laugh was bitter. You're stupider than I thought, Antonio. I've built redundancies, loyal people who will burn your family to the ground if anything happens to me. Maybe, Antonio acknowledged, but I'm willing to take that risk. The question is, are you willing to watch her die? He pulled a gun and aimed it at Mira's head, and time seemed to slow down. Mira saw Dante straining against his bonds, saw the calculation in Antonio's eyes, saw the men surrounding them tense for violence. And in that frozen moment, she remembered 3 days of training, of Dante's voice in her ear teaching her to think strategically, to look for weaknesses, to never give up even when the odds were impossible. The gun tucked into her waistband was a long shot, but it was the only shot she had. Mira's hand moved, fast as thought, pulling the weapon and firing in one smooth motion exactly as Dante had taught her. The bullet caught Antonio in the shoulder, and chaos erupted. Dante used the distraction to break free from his bonds with a roar of fury, and suddenly the warehouse was a war zone. Mira dove behind a stack of crates as bullets ricocheted around her, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. She could hear Dante fighting, the sounds of impact and shouted orders, but she couldn't see him through the smoke and shadows. "Mira!" Dante's voice cut through the chaos. "The east door! Run!" She didn't hesitate, sprinting toward where his voice had come from. A man stepped into her path, and Mira fired without thinking, watched him fall, and kept running. The weight of what she'd done would hit later, but right now, survival was all that mattered. Dante appeared out of the smoke like an avenging angel, blood on his face and murder in his eyes. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the exit, providing cover fire as they ran. They burst into the night air just as sirens wailed in the distance, and Dante pushed her toward a car that screeched to a stop beside them. "Get in!" he ordered, shoving her into the back seat before diving in after her. The car peeled away as the warehouse erupted in flames behind them, and Mira finally let herself breathe. "You were supposed to stay safe," Dante said, his hands checking her for injuries with desperate urgency. "You were supposed to trust me." "I did trust you," Mira replied, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "I trusted that you'd do something stupid and heroic, and I wasn't going to let you die for me, so I did something stupid and heroic first." Dante pulled her against his chest, his arms tight enough to hurt, and Mira felt his whole body trembling. "You could have been killed. When I saw you walk into that warehouse, I thought my heart was going to stop." "Welcome to how I've felt for the past week," Mira said, burrowing closer. "Every time you leave, I imagine 100 ways you might not come back. It's terrifying, Dante. Caring about you is absolutely terrifying." "I know." He pressed his face into her hair. "But you did it anyway. You came for me anyway." The safe house Dante's driver took them to was nothing like the penthouse. Just a small apartment in a building that looked ready to collapse. But it was secure, and right now, that was all that mattered. Dante checked the perimeter while Mira sat on the worn couch, her hands still shaking as the reality of what had happened crashed over her. She'd shot someone, maybe killed them. She'd walked into a trap and started a firefight that had probably left a dozen people dead. The old Mira, the one who'd existed just a week ago, would have been horrified. But this new version, the one forged in violence and danger, just felt numb. "Hey!" Dante knelt in front of her, his hands covering hers. "Talk to me. What's going on in that brilliant head?" "I killed someone." Mira's voice was hollow. "I looked a person in the eye and pulled the trigger, and I don't even know if I feel bad about it." "You were protecting yourself," Dante said firmly. "You were surviving. There's no shame in that." "You say that like it makes it okay." Mira looked at him, this man she'd fallen for despite every logical reason not to. "How do you do it? How do you live with the things you've done?" "By remembering why I did them." Dante cupped her face gently. "Every choice I've made, every line I've crossed, it's been to protect something or someone that mattered. Tonight, you made the same choice. You crossed a line to protect me, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure that sacrifice wasn't in vain." "What happens now?" Mira asked. "Antonio Rossi is still alive. His family will come for us." "Antonio Rossi won't be a problem much longer." Dante's smile was cold. "That warehouse fire? It's going to be investigated as an accident. The bodies inside will be identified as casualties of a gas leak. And Antonio, wounded and humiliated, will find his own family turning on him for the failure tonight represents." "You planned this," Mira realized. "You let them capture you." "I created an opportunity," Dante corrected. "I knew Antonio would try something, and I made sure I was too tempting a target to resist. What I didn't plan was you coming to my rescue and proving that you're far braver and more resourceful than even I realized." "I'm not brave," Mira protested. "I was terrified the entire time." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Dante said, pulling her close. "It's acting despite it. You were scared, and you came anyway. That's the definition of courage, Mira." They sat in silence for a long moment, holding each other while the adrenaline faded and exhaustion took its place. Finally, Dante stood and pulled her to her feet. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get cleaned up. We both look like we went to war." "We did go to war," Mira pointed out, but she let him lead her to the small bathroom. What followed was one of the most intimate experiences of Mira's life. Dante stripped away their bloody clothes with gentle hands, turned on the shower, and pulled her under the spray with him. He washed the blood and smoke from her skin with a tenderness that made her throat tight, his touch reverent as he cleaned away the evidence of violence. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured against her temple. "When Antonio called and said he had you, I felt something break inside me. I've lost people before, people I cared about, but the thought of losing you was something else entirely, something I couldn't survive." Mira's hands found his chest, tracing the bruises that were already forming. "You're not going to lose me. We survived tonight, and we'll survive whatever comes next." "Together," Dante said, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "No more heroic solo missions. We face this together or not at all." "Together," Mira agreed and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like gunpowder and hope. They dried off and collapsed into the single bed, tangled together in a way that had nothing to do with desire, and everything to do with the desperate need to confirm they were both alive. Mira fell asleep to the steady rhythm of Dante's heartbeat, the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the grimy windows, and Dante was on the phone speaking rapid Italian. He looked up when she stirred, his face softening, and ended the call. "Good news," he said, joining her on the bed. "Antonio Rossi suffered a fatal heart attack in the hospital this morning. Very tragic. His son Marco has assumed control of the family and is requesting a meeting to discuss peace terms." Mira sat up, processing the information. "You killed him." "I removed a threat," Dante corrected. "There's a difference. Antonio was too proud, too old school to ever let this go. But Marco is young, ambitious, and smart enough to know that continuing this war will destroy both our families. He'll agree to terms." "Just like that? It's over?" "The immediate threat is over," Dante clarified. "There will always be other challenges, other families trying to test boundaries. But yes, the war with the Rossis ends today. You're safe, Mira. Really safe, for the first time since this started." Mira should have felt relieved, but instead she felt strangely empty. "So what happens now? I go back to my apartment, my studio, my normal life?" "Is that what you want?" Dante asked carefully. Mira thought about her small apartment with its drafty windows, the studio space she could barely afford, the life she'd built from nothing through sheer determination. A week ago, she would have done anything to get back to that life. But now, after everything they'd been through, the thought of going back felt like moving backward instead of forward. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "Everything's changed. I've changed. I can't just go back to painting pretty pictures and pretending the past week never happened." "Then don't." Dante took her hands. "Stay with me. Not because you're in danger, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to. Build a life here, in my world, with all the complications and challenges that come with it." "You're asking me to be with you," Mira said slowly. "Really be with you, knowing what you do, knowing the kind of life you lead. I'm asking you to take a chance on us, Dante corrected. I know I'm not the safe choice, Mira. I know there are 1,000 reasons why you should walk away and never look back. But I also know that what we have, this thing between us, it's real. It's the most real thing I've felt in 15 years of living in shadows and lies. Mira looked at him, this man who turned her world upside down, who taught her to shoot and fight and survive in a world she'd never imagined existed. She thought about the painting in his penthouse, the two figures caught between light and dark, and realized she'd already painted her answer. I want to keep painting, she said finally. I want my own studio space, and I want to show my work without it being connected to you or your organization. I want to maintain some part of my life that's just mine. Hope flared in Dante's eyes. Done. Anything else? I want honesty, Mira continued. No more secrets, no more protection through ignorance. If there's danger coming, I want to know about it. If you're making decisions that affect us, I want to be part of that conversation. I can do that, Dante agreed. What else? I want you to promise me you'll try. Mira's voice cracked slightly. Try to build something legitimate, something that doesn't require violence and fear to maintain. I know you can't just walk away from everything overnight, but promise me you'll work toward a life that's about more than just survival. Dante was quiet for a long moment, and Mira saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded. I've been thinking about that anyway. The businesses I protect, most of them are legitimate. The restaurants, the clubs, they make real money without breaking laws. Maybe it's time to transition, to build an empire that doesn't require a body count to maintain. And in return, Mira said, her heart racing, I'll stay. I'll build a life with you, in your world, and I'll trust you to keep us both safe while we figure out what that looks like. Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. You won't regret this. I swear to you, Mira, I will spend every day proving that choosing me was the right decision. I'm going to hold you to that, Mira said against his chest. And Dante, I love you. I probably shouldn't, it's definitely too soon, and it's absolutely insane given the circumstances. But I do. She felt his sharp intake of breath, felt the way his arms tightened around her. I love you too. From that first moment at the charity event, I think some part of me knew you were going to change everything. I just didn't realize how much I needed that change until it was too late to walk away. They spent the rest of the morning in that small safe house, planning a future that seemed impossible and inevitable all at once. Dante made calls, setting terms with Marco Rossi that would ensure peace between the families. Mira sketched in a notebook Dante found for her, planning pieces that would capture this transformation from who she'd been to who she was becoming. By afternoon, it was safe to return to the penthouse. Rosa met them at the door, a bandage on her head and a relieved smile on her face. I'm so sorry, Mira said immediately. I had to— Save Mr. Caruso's life? Rosa interrupted. I know, and while I don't appreciate being knocked unconscious, I understand why you did it, though next time, maybe just ask me to look the other way. There won't be a next time, Dante said firmly. The war is over. Mira's safe, and I'm implementing new security measures to make sure we never get caught off guard again. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change. Dante kept his promise, beginning the slow process of transitioning his empire toward legitimate business. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks and challenges from people who preferred the old ways. But Dante was nothing if not determined, and with Mira by his side, he found motivation he'd never had before. Mira reclaimed her studio space, but Dante helped her find a new one in a better neighborhood with actual security. She painted furiously, creating pieces that captured the intensity of everything she'd experienced, the fear and violence and unexpected beauty of falling in love in the middle of chaos. Her first show after everything that had happened was a success beyond anything she'd imagined. Critics praised the raw emotion in her work, the way she captured light and darkness dancing together. They didn't know the paintings were autobiographical, that every brushstroke was a testament to surviving the impossible and choosing love anyway. Dante came to the opening in a suit that probably cost more than the paintings, standing in the back and watching Mira charm collectors and critics with the same intensity she brought to everything in her life. When their eyes met across the gallery, Mira felt her heart skip the way it had that first night, when a man with dangerous eyes had asked her about her art and changed her life forever. Your boyfriend is very intense, a gallery owner commented, following Mira's gaze. He hasn't taken his eyes off you all night. He's protective, Mira said with a smile. It's one of his better qualities. And the others? Mira thought about Dante's gentleness when he held her, his fierce loyalty to the people he loved, the way he was trying to build something better because she'd asked him to. He's complicated, she said finally. But so am I. We work. Later, after the gallery had closed and they were alone among her paintings, Dante pulled her close. I'm proud of you, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. You took everything that happened and turned it into art. That takes courage. I learned from the best, Mira replied, wrapping her arms around his waist. Besides, painting was the only way I could process it all. The fear, the violence, the way you looked at me like I was worth starting a war over. You were, Dante said simply. You are. Every day I wake up grateful that you walked into that charity event. Grateful that you gave me a chance despite every reason not to. You saved me, Mira. Not just from the Rossis, but from becoming the kind of man who'd forgotten why he started fighting in the first place. Mira looked up at him, this man who'd been both her captor and her savior, her greatest fear and her deepest love. We saved each other. That's how this works. 6 months later, Mira stood in the penthouse that had become home, putting the finishing touches on a painting that would serve as Dante's birthday gift. It was the two of them, rendered in her distinctive style. But this time the figures weren't fighting. They were dancing, still caught between light and dark, but moving together in perfect harmony. You're going to make me cry, Dante said from the doorway, and Mira turned to find him watching with an expression that made her heart soar. That's the idea, she said, setting down her brush. You gave me a new life, a safe place to create, and love I never thought I'd find. The least I can do is paint you something that captures how I feel about all of it. Dante crossed to her, pulling her into his arms, and Mira melted into the embrace that had become her favorite place in the world. Outside the windows, the city sprawled in all its chaotic beauty, full of danger and possibility and everything in between. But here, in this moment, in Dante's arms with her art surrounding them, Mira felt something she'd spent her whole life searching for. She felt home. She felt safe. She felt loved in a way that was fierce and protective and absolutely unbreakable. I have something for you too, Dante said, pulling back slightly. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box that made Mira's breath catch. Dante, she whispered, I know we said we'd take things slow. He opened the box to reveal a ring that was simple and beautiful and perfect. But I've never been good at slow, and I don't want to wait to make this official. Marry me, Mira. Build this empire with me, the legitimate kind that we can both be proud of. Paint your masterpieces and let me love you for the rest of our lives. Mira looked at the ring, at Dante's hopeful expression, at the life they'd built from chaos and violence and unexpected love. She thought about the girl she'd been, moving from foster home to foster home, invisible and forgotten. She thought about the woman she'd become, strong and capable and brave enough to choose happiness even when it came in the most unlikely package. Yes, she said, laughing through tears she didn't bother to hide. Yes, absolutely yes. Dante slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with the intensity that had characterized their entire relationship, fierce and tender and absolutely certain. When they finally broke apart, both smiling, Mira rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. We're going to have an interesting life, she said. Understatement of the century, Dante replied. But interesting beats boring any day. Mira had to agree. Her life had gone from invisible and forgotten to extraordinary and unforgettable in the span of a few weeks. She'd survived danger, discovered strength she didn't know she had, and found love in the last place anyone would expect. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in those same shades of crimson and gold that had terrified her weeks ago, Mira felt nothing but peace. She was Mira Castellano now, the woman who'd brought Dante Caruso to his knees, the artist who painted beauty from chaos, the survivor who'd chosen love over fear. And standing beside the man who'd changed everything, with a ring on her finger and a future full of possibilities stretching before them, Mira knew she'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice, not the easy choice, but the one that made her heart sing and her soul feel complete. Together, they'd build something beautiful, an empire of art and legitimacy, of love forged in fire and tested by violence. It wouldn't be perfect, and it wouldn't be simple, but it would be theirs. And for two people who'd spent their lives feeling invisible and alone, that was more than enough. It was everything.